Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is Shelley and I have created this channel to talk all things home, beauty, lifestyle and travel. The video today is going to be all about H. pylori or Helicobacter pylori, and this will be part one or episode one of a few videos that I'm going to create all about H. pylori and my experience, my personal experience with it. I was recently diagnosed with it back in February of this year, 2023. And we're now in May, so I'm 3 months along the way of healing from it, and I just wanted to share my experience with it because it's been quite a journey. I have been suffering for quite some time with digestive issues, and I was given all sorts of different diagnoses along the way, and it actually came to a bit of a head when I had a huge flare-up back in September 2022. And it took a while to find it. So I think because I found it so hard to get some of the answers that I really needed, I felt quite isolated with it. I felt quite alone, and I needed to find somebody who had experienced this so they could put my mind at ease. And so I decided that I was going to create these videos to help other people to basically have some sort of answers to some of the questions, because there isn't much out there. H. pylori is actually quite a common bacteria that lives in the wall of the stomach of, I'd say, 2/3 of the population of the UK alone. I'm not sure whether that is true fact. I've found that information out online, which is where I've had to find out a lot of my information, and there isn't much of it. So, and apparently there, out of those 2/3 of people, then only 1/10 will actually have a flare-up in their life. So I think it's something that needs to be spoken about a little bit more, just for people's reassurance, really, that it's treatable and it's not as scary as what it probably feels like when you're experiencing the symptoms. But yeah, okay, I just want to put a little disclaimer out there. This is purely my experience with H. pylori. This is not, I'm not a medical professional that is telling you facts and figures about it. I'm literally talking about it from my individual point of view. So yeah, I'll try and keep this particular video down to just the build up to just before I was diagnosed, because there's that much information that I really think would benefit people. I thought I'd kind of like split it down, but if you've got any questions, then pop them in the comments and I'll answer them either individually, or I can answer them as well within the next video. So this one is about the run up to being diagnosed and my signs and symptoms and what I'd been diagnosed with previously. And then the next video will be all about how I managed to find out that what it was. I'd probably say I've been having digestive issues for up to about 10 years, and things like bloating, indigestion, not necessarily anything, you know, too sinister or too inconveniencing at the time. It was just, oh, I've got a bit of bloating today, or oh, I've got a bit of heartburn today. And that's how it started for me. And that's going back quite a while. And then I, over the last sort of 7 years, I experienced quite an intense amount of life stress. So there was a big house move. My daughter was diagnosed with ADHD, and I started a new job. I was made redundant. There's so many different things that happened that kind of enabled this bacteria to come alive. And so over the last sort of 7 years, I started to get more intense symptoms. So the bloating became even more apparent. It was all the time, which could have been anywhere in the upper abdomen, lower abdomen, the whole thing. Very bloated all the time. And then I started to get quite a lot of headaches, which happened more frequently as time went on. So that became something that I'd never experienced before, but it crept up over the years. This wasn't just an instant new thing. And then I started to become intolerant to things. So whereas I always enjoyed having certain foods, I was all of a sudden unable to have them. So it was things like a bit of milk in my cup of tea. I couldn't have anything that was fermented. I couldn't have like kimchi, sauerkraut. I couldn't have oats all of a sudden. They were making me feel like I really wasn't very well, and I couldn't work it out. And of course, I went to the doctors on a number of occasions, and I was eventually diagnosed with IBS, irritable bowel syndrome, in, I'd say, about 5 years ago. I developed like severe anxiety, to the point where I was having terrible panic attacks, but not just an actual panic attack. I was getting like an electric shock kind of sensation on the right side of my body, just under my rib cage. And if I had a rush of adrenaline, whether I was excited or nervous, that would happen, and it was like an electric pulse, and it would make me stop in my tracks. So because all of these symptoms were coming on, and they were coming on stronger, I had no idea which way to turn with it. I just thought, maybe it's time for therapy. Is this just me now? I really don't want this in my life. I was getting quite desperate, to be honest. So I decided that I was going to train myself in some modalities to try and get some healing techniques that I could learn to use on myself, really, not to use on other people. So things like anxiety and stress management, Reiki, anything really that I could help myself with, diet, nutrition. So a couple of years ago, my symptoms were becoming so intense that I asked the doctor if I could be referred to the gastroenterologist. And they said, yes, that's fine, but there was going to be a bit of a wait. So I took matters into my own hands. I was getting really desperate by this point, to the point where I wasn't able to go out with friends. I couldn't go out for a meal in a restaurant without having horrible symptoms from eating pretty much anything, to the point where I was drinking a glass of water and I would have severe bloating. I felt ill, uncomfortable. My head would be thumping. It was getting a bit really uncomfortable by this point. So I found a nutritional therapist who I saw over the internet, and she basically guided me through what we thought was SIBO. I actually did a SIBO breath test at home. I bought it myself, and SIBO is small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, and because of all my symptoms I decided that it might be that. So I bought the test, did the test at home, it came back positive, and I was given a protocol by the company who I got the test from. But I wanted to speak to somebody who had a little bit more knowledge about SIBO, because at this point that's what I thought it was. So I enlisted the help of this nutritional therapist who specialised in gut health, hormonal health and SIBO, and she was brilliant. She gave me a nutritional supplement protocol with diet, and I was able to start feeling a little bit better, but I was still getting the electric pulse sensation in the side of my body. So a lot of my symptoms after seeing the nutritional therapist started to ease, and I was thinking, okay, maybe it was SIBO then, and then so maybe now I will start to feel better again. But I was still getting the electric shock kind of sensation just under my rib cage, and I thought, there's something else going on. I'm just not fully sure what. And so I decided that I was going to go and see the doctor in September last year. And by this point, I would say I was struggling to the point where I couldn't even drive the car. I just felt like there was like a fizzing sensation in my head, and I couldn't see properly. I just felt very disconnected, and all the kind of signs and symptoms of having stress and anxiety, and that's what I put it down to. And then, so by this point in September, my hormones were all over the place. I was having night sweats, I was having tinnitus, I was having incredible bloating and tummy pain, and I honestly thought I was going through the menopause. I thought, okay, I've dealt with SIBO, I think I've got anxiety and panic, I'm just going to label myself with that now, and now I think I'm going through the menopause. I saw the doctor in September, and she said, okay, before we do anything, let's do a blood test. So I thought, okay, that's fine, let's do a blood test. So we did that at the beginning of October, and then my results came back and my iron stores were almost depleted. And so we were like, oh, bingo, that's what it is, low iron, you know, that's what's causing all of these horrible symptoms. And I was like, great, what do I need to do? Here's some ferrous fumarate tablets, take one of those every day for the next 3 months, come back for your next blood test. So off I went with my packet of ferrous fumarate tablets, which were quite strong tablets of iron, and off I went. So I started taking the iron. I was taking one a day for about a week, and I started to get these like weird twinges in my muscles, in my head, and I rang the doctor and said, I'm not getting on with these tablets. They're just a little bit too strong. Generally, when you've got low iron, from my understanding, you've either got heavy cycles every month if you have a womb, or it's H. pylori, stroke, stomach ulcer, or bleeding. And I just said, oh yeah, it's definitely, it must just be monthly cycle. It's nothing else, definitely not. And I'd not even heard of H. pylori before, so for me that was definitely not even. So low iron for me was a monthly cycle, being, you know, somebody who has a womb. It was just that. That's why I was like, that's how I thought. And so I started taking the iron, the different iron. I was trying different ones. The more I took iron, the worse I felt. And now I know that taking iron was actually feeding the bacteria. So it was actually multiplying it and making it come out of the lining of the stomach, which in hindsight, actually, I'm very, very, very grateful for, because I was able to get that dealt with eventually. So the signs and symptoms of having this huge flare-up were incredible anxiety and panic. And I would say it was almost like the most terrifying thing in the world was about to happen to you. That's the only way I can describe how it felt. I'd wake up in the morning feeling like that. It would feel like that all day. And then I'd lie in bed feeling absolutely terrified. And I was alone with this. I was trying to explain it to my family, but nobody could really help me because nobody understood how it felt. So yeah, that was really tough going. They had to watch this happen, and the number of times that I either went to the walk-in centre, the local walk-in centre, rang the doctors. I nearly rang myself an ambulance on 2 or 3 occasions because I just felt so poorly. Things like eating something maybe that was a bit hot or spicy or anything like that, and it triggered it, and the flare-up would just literally go. It was like adding fuel to a fire. It was just going up, and I would literally not be able to get out of bed. Sometimes I was sitting on the sofa, I just needed to lie down. I had no energy. My whole body was just being consumed by this bacteria. And one doctor did mention H. pylori to me, and because I'd never heard of it before, I did go on the NHS website, which is the website in the UK for medical concerns, and I went onto that website and it explained that H. pylori was stomach ulcer, and I was like, oh no, I've definitely not got a stomach ulcer. I didn't realise that it was actually a bacteria. So I didn't realise that H. pylori was actually a stomach bacteria that caused stomach ulcers. I didn't realise that. So I basically dismissed it. I was put on PPI, which are proton pump inhibitors, by the walk-in centre, because they said, oh, we think you've got gastritis. You've got all the signs and symptoms of gastritis. Raw stomach, losing weight. I think I lost 9 pounds in 3 weeks in November, and that was horrible because my clothes were just becoming looser and looser, and I honestly started to think by this point, like, you know, there's something really sinister going on here, and I just wanted answers, and hence me doing this video, because I found such a little information online to give me a little bit of reassurance. And I just thought that this is it. I'm just going to be, needing home help. I cannot live like this anymore. And there were some very dark days that came out of all of this. And then I think it got to early February, and I'd carried on feeling like all these intense symptoms and signs. And then I started to get quite a metal taste in my mouth, and food, I couldn't eat anything. And so I rang the doctors and said, can I book for a H. pylori breath test? and they said, yep, that's fine, we can get you in. We can get you in I think they said 3 weeks. And I couldn't wait that long. I got in touch with the nutritional therapist and she ordered me a specific stool test from a company called In Vivo. And part of that stool test is a H. pylori test. So that's the one you do at home, and then you send everything else off. By this point, my hair was bone dry, my skin was bone dry, I was severely dehydrated, and my hormones were a mess. Which brings me to the end of February. So by the end of February, I was suffering with all of these symptoms. All of this was going on inside my body. My mental health was really suffering as a result. I wasn't going out. I hadn't been out for months. I hadn't driven the car for months. Something had to give. So at the end of February was where I decided to get myself booked in for a test with the doctor. At this point, we are at the end of February, which is where I bought my test. So I'll conclude this video and we'll carry on into the next video with part 2, which will be all about how I got tested and the testing process that you can do. So just to recap, the signs and symptoms of H. pylori that I had crept up on me over a number of years, and they started out very subtle, but then they became more and more and progressively worse until I had a big flare up in September last year. I really hope that this has helped somebody just to get some answers up to this point, and then hopefully if you've got any questions, pop them in the comments box below and I'll be able to answer them. But as I've said, I'm not a medical professional with regards to H. pylori, and I can't give facts or figures. This is just my experience, but I'm more than happy to chat and talk about it because I know how lonely and isolating it can be having digestive problems. Anything you want me to cover in the next video, then please let me know, and I'll see you next week.